I don't want to come off twice. So this is a new experience for me being live on YouTube. Everybody, if you're watching, there should be, if you're watching live, there should be a chat box to the right of what you're watching. And you can chat to us, you can ask questions, you can, comment, whatever. And I will try to keep track of that as Lynn and I are talking. And at the end, we'll definitely have a Q&A time where we'll spend some time and answer any questions that you might have. And let me just do a little bit of adjusting on my end here so that there we go. All right, so I have a very precious friend with me tonight, I guess we are. This is Lynn Breeden. Lynn was very instrumental in my beginning grief journey after Becca died. God just used Lynn in my life to draw me in, bring me into fellowship with other moms and who had lost a child. So hi, Lynn, I'm so excited to have you here and starting off and kicking off our first live time in May.
Hi, I'm excited to be here with you. I love when we get to do stuff together.
Yes. Yeah, we always enjoy these times together. So Lynn, I'm going to have you start out by just sharing your story with everyone, and then we'll go ahead and we're going to be talking about Mother's Day.
My story goes back to 1987, so it's been 33 years this year. Joel was the middle son of 3 boys. He was almost 5 years old. He had a cold. We went to the doctor. Long story short, we ended up a week later at Riley, diagnosed with a very rare tumor. It was taking in it was in his chest, the size of a football. Within 24 hours, they removed it. 2 weeks later, it was something that they'd never seen before. So 2 weeks later, we got the diagnosis that it was a really rare type of cancer. And by that time, the tumor was so fast growing, it had grown larger than the first one. So now it's bigger than a football. They were able to remove all of it but 5%. So that 5% grew into, we started chemo, radiation, and had a surgery scheduled, and he died of an infection 2 months after he was diagnosed. He was 5 years old. My oldest was 7. My youngest was 3.5. At that time, it threw us in a tailspin. You know, I knew that because I love the Lord and I was praying, and I had everybody I knew praying on every prayer chain, that we were going to be the example of what God can do and the miracles he can perform. And I was devastated when that didn't happen. I didn't understand why my faith wasn't big enough to save my child, which is a whole nother segment. So but anyway, so a long journey. Obviously, I've been doing this 33 years. God has really shown me so much over the years, and about, probably 10 years ago now, maybe longer, I'd always have ministered to moms who have lost children over the years. God has just kind of put them in my path. About 10 years ago, I formed the ministry Mourning to Dancing, and have been able to enter into many more lives. He seems to just kind of drop those people in my lap, which has been such a blessing, and to be able to use what I've experienced all these years to be able to help other moms in how they can experience this grief and what that looks like, and to affirm that they're not going crazy and all those things that we feel in those, especially first few years. So it's been a beautiful, scary, hard road, but beautiful because of the people like you that I've encountered, and been able to not only minister to you, but how you have ministered through your books and ministry. And we've gotten to tandem many things in walking through this. So that's it in a nutshell, I guess.
Yeah, and Lynn also, for people who don't know, Lynn is a pastor, and she pastors a Methodist church, and she is in Indiana. And so, welcome to those who have joined in while Lynn was sharing with us her story about the loss of her son, Joel. And I think some of you, a lot of you, can probably relate to the whole, especially if you had a child who was sick. You can totally relate to the prayers, and that this is going to be one of those miracle healings with a testimony. And if you can relate to that, we've got a little chat window there. So yeah, if you can relate to that, let us know and say hi if you're watching. So because we really want this to be interactive. So Lynn, we are going to be talking about Mother's Day. And there are actually two Mother's Days for those of us who've lost a child. And some watching may not be aware of that. It's just kind of grown and gotten big in the last few years, but there's actually an International Bereaved Mother's Day. And that is the first Sunday in May. And we're going to start though with the regular Mother's Day, the second Sunday in May, that we're all much more familiar with. And then we'll circle back around and talk a little bit more about the bereaved Mother's Day. But Lynn, Mother's Day for most of us, you and I have talked about this. It's one of the hardest days of the year, isn't it? I mean, it's like right up there with our child's birthday and their anniversary death date, isn't it?
It is, and in some ways, it's the hardest day. At least that's my experience. It's the hardest day of the year. And the reason it's the hardest day for me is you're conflicted. There's so much conflict. On Joel's birthday, everybody acknowledges that that's a hard day, and you're either surrounded with people who love you and support you, or you've chosen to take this day. And I've done it over 33 years, so I've done it a lot of different ways. But it's acknowledged as a day that you grieve. The holidays, they're acknowledged. His death day, that's a day you get to grieve. Mother's Day, if you have other children, is not acknowledged as a day you get to grieve. In fact, most people, when you tell them Mother's Day is the hardest day for me, they don't even understand that. Like, why? Because it's Mother's Day. And I have 5 boys.
You're a mom.
Why you're a mom, and why would that be a hard day? I have 5 boys, and Joel's in heaven, the other 4 are here, and I'm conflicted because I want to celebrate the children I have here, and that's the obvious on Mother's Day, but I'm reminded all day long that I'm missing one of my children. And so it's a really hard day. It's a really hard day.
Yeah, and I think about the parents. I know quite a few parents now who they lost their only child. And I know a few parents who have lost like both or all of their children.
Right.
And so that, to me, that's that makes it even more difficult, because it's like, yeah, I know I'm a mom, but I don't feel like a mom. And people say, of course you're a mom, you're still a mom. But saying that doesn't make it feel any better, does it?
No, it doesn't. And, for most of us, we're defined by being a mom. And if you talk to people who don't have children or have lost children, one of the first questions in a get to know you with somebody is, how many children do you have? Or tell me about your children. And then you're put in this awkward position. And I think Mother's Day is just one more in your face that you are a mom, but you're not acknowledged by the world as a mom. And so it's a tough day. It's a tough day all the way around.
Yeah, definitely. I was reading something actually a little bit earlier today, and I thought it was interesting on this kind of the topic of if you've lost your only child or all of your children. And what I read was, you were just talking about it being our identity, our children being a mom, or a dad, that's part of our identity, grandma, grandpa, all of that. And so when that's been taken from us in the sense of being right here in front of me, what I read was kind of interesting, because when our parents die, or like if your mom passes away, you don't feel like you're not a daughter anymore, do we?
Yep.
Not really.
No.
I don't feel
No.
like, well, I'm not a daughter now. My dad died. We don't feel that way.
No.
But for some reason, the opposite, for some reason, we take on that feeling of, I don't really feel like I'm a mom anymore. And so maybe even just maybe one of those kind of a thoughts, that, okay, so if I've had a parent pass, or when my parent passes, it's not going to make me feel like that means I'm not a daughter anymore. So maybe I can take that and try to take it over to the other side of things, and kind of push that over there and say, I am a mom. I am a mom, so that you feel more like you're a mom, because that's got to be so hard. So hard.
Well, and it kind of falls in that same category as when someone asks you, how many children do you have? Well, you're in this kind of place of, well, do I acknowledge that I have 5 boys? Or do I just say I have 4 boys? Because if they continue and ask the question, tell me about your children or whatever, then at some point you feel like you're going to have to say, well, 4 of them are here, but 1 of them's in heaven. And then you're trying to help them not feel awkward. And I've learned that I tell them I have 5 children, and 1 of them's in heaven and the other here. And I feel like I have to acknowledge Joel. But it's kind of that same thing with having lost the only child you have, you want to be able to say, I have a child, my child lives in heaven with Jesus. And there's got to be ways we can say that and acknowledge it, because that's our job as moms who have lost children, is to make sure our children are never forgotten. Our children lived, they were important, they were valued, and it's our job, at least I think as moms, it's our job to make sure that they're always remembered and that they are valued. And so I think it's important that we acknowledge that.
And I think too, it's helpful that our children are still alive.
Exactly.
They're not here. They've just
That's
transferred on to where we're going to be eventually. And so I only said one time, because I have 5, and there was only one time when someone asked me, I said I have 4, and it felt so horrible and so wrong. It was like, never again. never again will I say that. Now this year is going to be really different with Mother's Day, because Mother's Day is usually celebrated big in the churches. We all go out to eat. It's a big deal. And that's just not going to happen this year. Is that a good thing or a bad thing, do you think?
Well, I think for me, when my boys were little, they never knew that Mother's Day was a hard day. In fact, as they got older, I finally allowed them to see that that's a struggle for me, because I felt like it wasn't right to put that on them. I felt like they needed to know that I celebrated them as a mom. I cried myself to sleep every Mother's Day night. At some point, I acknowledged that and kind of lived in it. Now that my boys are all grown, I have to push that down for church, because I'm the pastor and I'm preaching a Mother's Day sermon. Although my church always has known that this is a hard day for me, and there's usually some tears at some point through that service, because it's just hard. And I think it's important to be real with them and for them to understand my grief and how hard it is. And hopefully that helps them with somebody else maybe in their life that they know that is also grieving. I think it's going to be better, in my own opinion, because I don't have to try to keep my act together for much longer than an hour, because I'm just doing one live worship. It takes me an hour and I'm done, and I can kind of be what I am. I don't have to pretend for my kids, other than probably a FaceTime chat maybe, but I think it'll be better for me. I like my grief to be mine. I'm not a share my grief with everybody kind of person. So I don't know. I miss my church too, so that's really hard to say. I think it'll be better, honestly. So what about for you? What are you thinking about it?
I think I agree with you. I think because I think I like to let moms off the hook on Mother's Day. Now, as a pastor and as a mom, a grieving mom, a bereaved mom, you get this. But I let moms know it's okay not to go to church.
Yeah, it is.
If you feel
Absolutely.
like it's going to be too hard, a lot of churches give the moms a flower, stand up, acknowledge and rightfully so. I mean, it's a
Sure, it's
wonderful
okay to do
thing to respect and honor moms.
that.
But as a bereaved mom, and especially if it's fresh, the first year, 2, 3 years, 5 years, that is just so hard to sit through that and be acknowledged as a mom, because you don't know, do people know that it's not just my children that are here with me.
Mhm.
And so I like to give moms permission. If you can't sit
Yep,
through church, don't go. It's okay. It's
it's
okay.
okay.
God understands.
That's right.
And the whole going out to eat dinner thing, and everybody's out, celebrating moms. And I think I think to be able to have a more low key day, I I think is appreciated.
I think it's okay.
Yeah.
And I think it goes to that same that
Hmm.
it's so hard because we're conflicted. On Joel's death day and his
Hmm.
birthday, everybody gets that I just lay low that day. But on Mother's Day, you don't get that same thing. And I tell my moms the same thing. You get grace on Mother's Day. You do what you need to
Oh
do.
yeah.
And I do a
Hmm.
thing in mine where I kind of acknowledge all the different types of moms, because there's many of us, not just bereaved, but there are foster moms, and there's all kinds of moms out there. And I try to acknowledge all of them, including the moms that put a teddy bear on a grave. So yeah, I think it's okay.
Yeah, and there's also the women who long to be a mom and they've
That's right.
never been able to. That's a hard day for them too. That's a,
It's
a
really
different
hard.
kind of grief. They've lost
It
children
is.
they've never had.
That's
So you're
right.
right. There are so many moms that this is a hard day.
Well, and there's
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, there's moms. I've had moms who have had an abortion at some point in their journey, and that's a hard day for them. I mean, there's so many
Oh
different
yeah.
animals in this that make this a really hard day for many, many people. For some, that are reasons that they don't even want to talk about or acknowledge, and that's okay. So yeah, there's all kinds of grace on that day for me, all kinds of grace.
It seems like to me, the further into this I go, this journey I go, the
Mhm,
more I hear from more people that Mother's Day is hard for them than it
mhm.
is mothers. This is a wonderful day. I love it. I mean, because it's also the
Right,
other end. If you've lost your mom, it's a hard day.
it
I
is.
mean, it almost
It's
feels like,
tough.
can we just like nix Mother's
I
Day and just
know. Can we
not
just make
have
it
it
a
anymore?
day? I know, exactly. And I'm grateful. The first year that my boys realized it was a hard day for me, the girls wanted to all go to a movie that night or that afternoon, and I didn't want to go. I mean, that's not how
When you
I
say the girls, you're talking about their wives or
the daughters
girlfriends?
and their wives. And I had, at that
Mhm.
time, I had a granddaughter that was old enough to do that. We were all just going to go watch like a chick flick, and I had never done that. I mean, Mother's Day was, I just get through what I have to, and then it's my day to just lay back and do nothing. And so my immediate
It
was,
almost feels like a sacred day, doesn't it?
it is. I mean, that's how I felt. And I immediately said, no, I'm not going. And they didn't understand. And I had to kind of explain myself. And to be honest, I ended up going because I thought, this is another one of those times that I have the opportunity to bond with the girls. And I can do this when I come back. And I did go, and I dreaded it. And I cried through the movie. And they were so sweet to me. And it gave them an opportunity to love me, and instead of, being in my bathtub with, with a lot of tears. So I just think sometimes God
A
makes it
saltwater
okay.
bath.
Yeah, saltwater bath. That's right. So sometimes it's an opportunity for people to love us through that they'd never had that opportunity, because they didn't even know that it was a hard day for me. It was eye-opening for them. So I don't
That's
know.
very true.
It's
And I think
a
some of,
mixed bag.
yeah, I think some of it too, the conflicting, I mean, for you to have gone so many years of just keeping that grief to yourself so that your other children didn't, I mean, so that your other children could still honor you and feel like Mother's Day was something good for them, not something that they dreaded because mom's thinking of our brother and she doesn't care about us. Because
Right.
we can without realizing it or wanting to, that's
Mhm.
the message we can pass on to our other kids, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And my youngest at that time was still a teenager. And it was my oldest son's wife that wanted to, do this. And of course, at that time, Taylor didn't have a girlfriend or a wife. And he really had a hard time with that, because why is that hard for you when you have children to celebrate? Why do you have to focus on the one that's not here when you have 4 boys who adore you? And that's a really hard thing, and it's a hard thing to even answer. Then that's why I say it's a conflict, and that's why I didn't share it with them. You're right, because I didn't want them to feel bad about it. It was
Well,
mine.
and
Now I
in
get
your instance too, yeah, in your instance, you have 2 boys that knew Joel as a brother
it.
and 2 boys who didn't.
Who don't.
And so that
Right.
can make a difference too. Like for
It
me,
does.
Becca was the oldest. My youngest was 16 when she passed. So, I mean, well, it affects every family deeply anyway, but I mean, the relationships that were there, most of them had adult relationships with their older sister,
Mhm.
and it's a real struggle to find, and I guess I don't even like the word balance, to find a way where you can still grieve the one that you'll never get a card from them, you're not going to get a hug from them, you're not going to hear Happy Mother's Day, a phone call, a FaceTime. That's not going to happen, and we have to grieve that.
We do.
um, and especially a day when it's all about being a mom.
Mhm.
But we also have to figure out how to not let that leak over so that our
Mhm.
other children feel like they have to tiptoe around us on Mother's Day because all mom's doing is thinking about the one that's gone instead of those of us who are here. And
So
that's
hard.
boy,
It's just so hard.
but does it get easier as you go along a little bit, Lynn? I mean, you've been doing this for 33 years now. Is there?
Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Yes and no. It's easier because my boys are older and they understand it better. So they are comforting me along with. It's easier because my coping skills are so much better than they were 30 years ago.
Mhm.
I've learned how to cope. I I have to say there are still times that I'm blindsided, just like we all are. We don't see it coming, and there it is. And um, I'm I've learned how to not allow myself to go over that edge, to keep myself back, um, and go over the edge when I can. It's such a balancing act, and I agree. I don't even like that terminology, but it kind of is, And yes, it does get easier, but only because I think we're coping better. I don't think it's easier really, but I think I'm learning how to cope with it better. I'm dealing with different things now than I did 30 years ago. Now I'm watching my older children with wives and grandchildren, and I cry over who would Joel have been. He was 5 years old. I didn't get to see him go to high school and go to prom and get married and have children? What would his children be like? So those things, if I allow myself to go there, I could have a really good cry over, and I do often because I don't know. And I'm reminded when I see my older boys and their children. So it's different, you know. I think as you move through it, you go through different phases, just like we do with our children, you know.
Yeah. Do you think it's helpful if we go into Mother's Day thinking I'm going to allow myself that good, raw, blubbering, snot-nosed cry, like at the beginning of the day or the end of the day? I'm going to give myself an hour to just go for it, lean into the grief, have that good, hard, sobbing cry. Is that helpful, do you think, to go into Mother's Day with a plan like that?
Yes. My answer is yes. I know, and maybe that's not the right answer, but it's the right answer for me. I know that at some point in Mother's Day, I will be crying. Usually it's the end of my day. Usually it's the culmination. Last year, Lindy and I were kind of reminiscing. Last year, Lindy's twin, Landy, and their 3 girls were here because we had a family wedding. And we had dinner and we laughed and we had a dance party, and I went to bed and the girls came up to say goodnight to me, and I was crying, and they all crawled into bed with me and they all cried with me. And it was soothing. It's comforting. It's I think a good cry is healthy for us. It's cleansing. I think those tears cleanse our hearts. And I don't cry often. I'm not a real crier kind of person. So I go in knowing I'm gonna have a good cry, and I think I'm better for it. I think you have to know your system and your body, and if that really is good for you. It is for me. I don't know if it is for everybody. I think the anticipation of Mother's Day sometimes is worse, or any anniversary of our children. I think the anticipation is worse than the actual day. Usually, it has been for me. We start gearing up because we know it's coming, right? Fall is hard for me. Fall is hard because I've got a birthday and his death anniversary, and when he was sick, is in the fall, from August to October. So I start gearing up in the summer. I know it's coming. I struggle. 33 years later, I still do the same thing, and I'm sure I will until the day I take my last breath. It's just my life. So I don't know.
And I think if someone who hadn't lost a child heard that, they would think, oh my goodness, what's wrong with you people? But I think for us who have lost a child, it's kind of a relief that I can't forget my child. I won't forget my child. This is always, as I go along, I'm 8 years along, and it still hurts like crazy. I still cry. And so when you hear someone who's 33 years along, it's like a relief that I'm okay if I'm still a mess for Mother's Day or whatever that time of year is.
You are. I think that I think we need permission to feel the way we feel. And to be really honest, there've been, not in the beginning, but there had been Mother's Day where I'm really okay. You know, I mean, I have his birthday. Some birthdays I don't even want to, like, I usually put something on Facebook acknowledging his birthday. And I think 2 years ago, I didn't want to do anything. I didn't want to acknowledge it. I just wanted to just kind of be in my own. I didn't want anybody to be in it with me. And then the next year I put it all back out there again. It's like every year's different every year. And I think it's okay to do what you feel like you should do, you know, just because you did it last year doesn't mean you have to do it again this year. And maybe this year won't be quite as hard. There won't be the same triggers, maybe. I mean, we have those triggers for our grief, and sometimes they're not there, and sometimes they're there in spades. But it's okay. Whatever you feel is okay to feel.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely.
For as long as you grieve.
Yeah, which will be as long as we're here, as long as we're in our own human body.
I think too. Yes.
Yeah. So I just started thinking today about just kind of maybe a list of ideas of things that maybe those who are watching can do maybe to, I don't say take care of yourself, but I guess to help get yourself through this. So I'm going to throw it out to you first. Do you have anything that like you've done over the years that you said, well, one year I did this and that really helped, or I remember doing this and that really helped? What you got for us?
Um, for Mother's Day, I just revel in my children. I love them. They understand that I'm grieving along with celebrating. And so honestly, I usually have a glass of wine at the end of the day, and I always, my husband is so amazing. He asks the questions to help me purge the things that I need to talk about, and he listens to it as if he has never heard it before. And I need to talk about it. I need to hear Joel's name those days. I need to be able to talk about him. And so those are the things that I think are really important. It's just the acknowledging. And I've read a lot of things where people are afraid to say their name because they don't want to make you cry or whatever. We're gonna cry. It's okay to
Mm-hmm.
say their name. We want to hear their name. I need to be able to say Joel's name often. And I like telling his story. I like hearing about who he was. So I think those are the things. I don't really have rituals. I'm not I don't, we used to do balloons and let them go, but we haven't done that the last couple of years because of the environment. So that tradition was kind of
Mm-hmm.
taken away. But over the years, like on Joel's 21st birthday, Lindy brought balloons attached to a 6-pack of beer because it was his 21st birthday, just kind of silly things, but we acknowledge it. So what do you do? How have you done that?
Well, yeah, I think every year has been different. And
Mhm.
we do still keep the tradition of going out to eat. And it's hard, but
Mhm.
it's interesting because, like you said, some years I feel like I'm okay. I'm okay,
Mhm.
and I might have a really good cry in the morning and get it out first thing in the morning, and then I seem to be okay for the day.
Mhm.
Um, I try to wait until evening to have a good cry on Mother's Day
Me too.
because I just look so horrible, and everybody knows I've been crying. My
Right?
face is red, my nose is red. It's like
Mhm.
my eyes are drooping. But I'm like you. There's not really anything traditional that I do like every year, but just thinking about some things that maybe because I think sometimes it's helpful to get ideas from
Mhm.
what can I do. And so
Mhm.
I'm just going to run through a list of some things that I wrote down, and maybe this one's really obvious, and not everyone has a grave site because some parents have,
Mm.
your child was cremated, but
Right.
it's okay to go visit the grave. I mean, we think about doing it
Mhm.
on maybe, well, it's okay to go there and have your good cry,
Mhm.
and just
Right.
go by yourself or whatever.
That's
And
wonderful.
it may sound weird to say you have permission to, but you do.
Mhm.
If that's where you feel like you need to go and be, then go and be there. And how about buying yourself some flowers?
Mm.
you know, I mean,
Right.
whether your kids are going to give you flowers or not, but something that'll brighten you up. Do something for yourself. And like you said, taking a bath, lighting candles, just something that's soothing and relaxing and comforting to you. Um, Going somewhere, doing something that maybe you and your child used to enjoy doing together. Now, I know sometimes it would I couldn't do that. That would just hurt too much. But for other
Mhm.
parents, that would be something that would just be comforting. So it's
Mhm.
just we're all different, and we're all different from year to year. That's what's so crazy
That's
about it.
exactly right. It is
What
crazy.
works
Yeah.
for us one year can be totally, I can't do that this year.
Yep.
Writing a letter to your child,
Mm. I love that.
even picturing what they would be like today, pretend like you're
Mhm.
writing a letter to them and they're just off somewhere and you just have a chance to write them a letter. What would life be like? What would, or even just writing the letter on how much you miss them, whatever. Maybe like, you know how sometimes you have that empty chair they talk about at
Mhm.
Thanksgiving? Why not do that for Mother's Day?
Sure.
Have the empty chair, have a candle, a picture, and do that for Mother's Day. I don't know if
Mhm.
we really think about, I mean, it's so typical at Thanksgiving, the empty chair at
Mhm.
Thanksgiving or
Sure.
Christmas, but we don't
Mhm.
think about that for Mother's Day.
Right.
So make
Right.
space for them. We already talked about giving everybody permission to have that ugly cry to to do it. Um, and I think this is probably a good segue to kind of go into there's the bereaved Mother's Day,
Mhm.
and that is what's coming up this Sunday in 2 days. So um, I have a little something that I did some digging a couple years ago when I first heard about this International Bereaved Mother's Day.
Mhm.
Um, I did some digging because I wanted to find out where this came from and what exactly it was about. And so
Mhm.
I'm just going to read this real quick. This day was actually started by a woman named Carly Marie in Australia, based on the death of her son Christian, whom she gave birth to, knowing he had already died in her womb a few weeks previously. She
Hmm.
says, in 2010, I felt drawn to create International Bereaved Mother's Day to help heal hurting mothers' hearts. International Bereaved Mother's Day is intended to be a temporary movement. It is a heart centered attempt at healing the official Mother's Day for all mothers. I believe that we can do this and that sometime in the near future there will be no need for this day at all because all true mothers will be recognized, loved, supported, and celebrated. And when I read what she said about it, I thought, I don't want it to be temporary.
Right?
I like the idea of having a special Mother's Day where
Mhm.
it's specifically set aside so that it we can acknowledge that we have a child that's not here
Mhm.
to give us a special day, to be a part of that special day.
Yeah, I like that too. I like that too. I think,
I thought it was
somewhere
interesting
I
that she thought
read,
it was going to be temporary.
I know, I
Mhm.
thought that too. I read that today too. I was reading kind of up on what that looked like. And I thought that was interesting because I think we've said, 33 years later, and I'm still struggling with Mother's Day, and I'm confident that I will when I'm, taking my last breath. Mother's Day is just hard. I had um, a friend who they planted like flowers or a tree or whatever on Mother's Day because it kind of showed a new life and it was an acknowledgement. And I thought that was kind of a sweet idea. It's not something I've done, although I always get flowers on Mother's Day and plant them. So I guess in a sense I have always done that. But it's a specific, that you're thinking about that as you're planting that tree, new life and all of that. So I think that whatever you do is okay. And I really like the idea, and we've touched on it all along, but it's kind of about self-care. And Mother's Day, they talk a lot about that self-care and taking care of your mom and the things, the gifts and the things you do. But it's really important that we do take care of ourselves. We're not fit to be moms to the rest of our kids if we're not taking care of ourselves. And I think that that's an important part of this is to acknowledge what it is you need. And it's okay if there's nothing wrong with you if you have a year that, what, I think I'm kind of okay today. Like it's really, the anticipation was
Mhm.
worse and I'm really kind of okay. And then the year where you wake up crying and you go to bed crying, and that's okay too. I think that there's a lot of um, expectations on what we should or shouldn't be in our grief journey. And I think that we're getting better at acknowledging that we're okay to grieve for as long as we're going to grieve. And that probably is until you take your last breath. You're going to grieve your child. It's a part of you that is gone, and it's okay to do that. So I think there are people who want to say, you should be over that by now, really? um, and I think we're getting better at not saying that, but I think there are still people out there that do that. And I feel bad for the people that are subjected to that because that's real. And there are people who are doing that to our bereaved mothers, and that's not okay. We need to acknowledge that's not okay. You get to grieve for as long
Yeah.
as you need to grieve.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's
You know,
important.
one thing another thing that I like about having the bereaved Mother's Day the week before the regular Mother's Day is, for me, it gives me an opportunity to lean into the grief of being Becca's mom and she's not here, so that the next week it's almost like I've given that time to Becca, and now Mother's Day frees me up to be a part of Mother's Day for my other children.
I, I, I would
And
like to think
so,
it would work that way. I'm not sure that it would in my head. I'm not sure. And maybe because I've done it for
mhm.
33 years, that I'm not sure if I could separate, but maybe because I've never done it, so maybe,
Yeah,
maybe that would work. I like it. It's a
yeah,
good
yeah.
premise.
I know it's a good thought anyway, right?
Yeah, it is.
Mhm.
Yeah, it
What-
is. I like that.
one thing that on bereaved Mother's Day that is getting more and more common, and I'll just throw it out there in case anyone watching this wants to do it, is they paint or draw their child's name on their hand, like on the hand here. And so
Uh-huh.
they'll write the name of their child that they're missing. And I've done that for a couple of years with a heart on it. But I've also been really I don't know, it just seemed, I didn't want my other kids to see it either.
I
You
can
know, so
see
it's
that.
kind of like I did it, took a picture of it, and then kind of before I saw the other kids, because it is hard to think, well, you haven't done that with me, but you're still here. So, but that is something that kind of brings the moms together who have lost a child, and on that day, just a way to acknowledge that child. I think I'm gonna pop over here, and I know we've got Angelique has been saying some things here,
Hmm.
and we have Ruby here, and yeah, and she's just acknowledging. She says you have permission to journey the way you want to journey. Let's be free to walk this
Amen.
walk the way we need to walk this walk. Angelique, she's become a precious friend of ours in Florida, and they lost their only child.
Hmm.
And so she just commented on that's got to be hard to preach on Mother's Day as a mother
It's,
who's lost a child. And we have,
mhm.
yeah, and we have
Yeah.
Priscilla here, and she says, I'm new to this. Yeah, Priscilla and I have been in contact with each other, and this is a new journey for her,
Mhm.
and she appreciates this time here. So anyone that's watching, if you have any questions or any comments, go ahead and type them in now, because Lynn and I will answer your questions. And I'll tell you, I know with Lynn, I'm safe to say it doesn't even have to do with Mother's Day.
Sure doesn't. No,
So that's our
never.
topic, but you've got access to someone that's been on this road for a long time, and she's been a mentor to me on this journey. I'm doing what I'm doing because Lynn stepped into my life when God brought her into my life. So
Oh, great.
so I just highly love and respect Lynn. So this is a good chance to ask questions. And if you're thinking about asking questions or whatever, I have something that I wrote, and I'll go ahead and read it now. And it'll be showing up on Facebook shortly. But I can't remember if I wrote it last year, a couple of years ago. You know, things blur together.
Sure.
But it ended up. I call it a letter to my child on Mother's Day, and so I'll just read it here. My child, flesh of my flesh, soul of my soul, part of my very being. I had an instant, deep, and fierce love when I first saw you. My heart was yours, and I knew I would give my very life to protect you. And yet, here I sit with the suffocating pain and darkness of knowing I was unable to protect you from death. So now I find that just as deep and intense as my love for you is the deep and intense pain of my grief in living without you. And yet I know that somehow I must. How? How, God? How do I go on with a piece of my very being gone from this earth? And as I ask and seek for this help, God, in his tender love, compassion, and faithfulness, reminds me that I don't have to live without you. You are forever in my heart and my thoughts, and forever a part of my very being, that our separation is only temporary. You have just moved on to our eternal home before me and have unpacked and settled in, waiting for me and the rest of us to join you. This isn't a final goodbye. It's an I'll see you later. When I have the thoughts that I would give anything to see you again, to hug you or hear you laugh, I realize that I will. Maybe not as soon as I want to, but it will happen. And so I wait. I will wait with hope, expectancy, and even excitement to see you again. Every day I am here on this earth means I am one day closer to that desperate need I have as a mother to love on you. And while I wait, I will choose to live my life in a way that is full, full of love, full of peace and contentment, full of laughter. And yet I know it will still be full of pain and longing, for I have now learned that all of these things can live inside of me together. So on this day of honoring bereaved mothers, let me say that I am honored. I'm honored and blessed to be your mom, and I imagine and dream of our reunion someday filled with love and joy that goes beyond words to describe it. But until then, I will have good days and bad days. I will have days filled with happiness and days filled with pain. And all of those days, I will continue to miss you with every fiber of my being.
Amen. That's so sweet. I love that. Well said. Well said. That's how we feel. That is how we feel.
Yep.
Thank you. Thanks for
Yeah.
sharing that. That's really, really sweet. You have such a beautiful way of writing. It puts our hearts and our thoughts to pen, and I love that. Thank you. It's a
You're
hard
welcome.
place to be. I think that you know, we can do all of this, and I have done this for 33 years because I do it on God's strength, not my strength. And I think that's the part that's really important. I talk to families, as I'm sure you do, who don't have the hope in Jesus Christ that we do. And their grief looks very different than the grief you and I have been talking about tonight. Their grief is not wanting to acknowledge their child. They don't want anybody to talk about their child. We just don't talk about it. And there's so many ways that are so foreign to how I grieve, and not that theirs is right or wrong as well, but I grieve with Jesus. And I know that this, when I get through those days, and I've gotten through 33 years because I do this on Jesus' strength, not my strength. And when I'm at the end of my rope, he comes in and just takes over. And so I think that the scripture that has carried me through is I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I have a very real story that started when Joel was sick. And, you know, I sat on a bathroom floor, scared to death of going into that day. And I know that I got up and picked myself, washed my face, and walked out that bathroom door knowing I can do this, not because I can do it, but because Jesus is going to give me the strength I need. And he has done that over and over and over and over again for 33 years. So we grieve, but we grieve differently because we grieve with a hope in knowing I get to see my Joel someday soon. When God is done with me here, I get to be in heaven with him. And I don't worry about him. You know, I have my anxiety over my children that are here and all that they experience, but I've never once worried about Joel, never once. I know he is in the Father's hands. He is playing on the streets of gold. He is happy as a clam. And I don't have to worry over where he is and what's going on in his world because he is good. And there's a comfort in that. When you have other children, you know there's a comfort in knowing I don't worry about Joel. I know exactly where he is, and he's okay. He's okay.
That's right. That's right. Well, it looks like we have a few questions coming in, Lynn.
Good.
So Angelique says, how about honoring our mom? It's so hard for me to be around my mom and mother-in-law that day. I feel guilt, but it's just so much still. Now, I know Angelique is she's not even at 2 years. She's about a year and a half into this journey. So yeah, that's hard.
It's hard. You know, that everything about this day is hard. And that's why I said there's so much conflicting in this day, because you don't get to just revel in how you feel like you do on the other anniversaries with your child. This is a day that is shared with your children. It's shared with your mother and your mother-in-law. And that's why my cry happens at the end of the day. Because I get through what I feel like is right and good in honoring my children and my mom and mother-in-law. My mother-in-law's passed now, but so I think it's hard, you know. I mean, it's just a hard day, and I think I've always just gone through the motions of going out to dinner and doing what we do. Um, do you have an answer? Do you have a better answer
Well,
than that?
no, not necessarily better. I mean, there's just no way around it. It's just hard. Everything about this day is hard. But I did have the thought, Angelique knows that I talk a lot about perspective. Perspective can change everything for us, even if it's just for the moment or for the hour. And so I have learned in this journey to pray and ask God to change my perspective when I'm really struggling with something. Lord, let me see it how you see it. Let me see it in a way that helps. And so in just thinking about the perspective, and I know that just because I know Angelique, I know that her mom struggles with Isaiah's death. You know, she lost her grandson, and they're a very close family. And I the perspective for me, we lost Dave's mom, my mother-in-law, almost a year ago. My mom is still here. And the fact that the perspective that I still have my mom and how grateful I am for that I'm not also right now grieving my mom's death. No, I'm grieving my mother-in-law. This will be the first year that we won't have her around to see and bless and be with. But, you know, possibly asking the Lord to help change the perspective in the sense of being so blessed and thankful that my child's not here, but my mom is. And that's really the only thing that I can think of is asking God to help change the perspective on that.
It's all about prayer. You know, I mean, that day, I don't think I've ever gotten through one Mother's Day without a whole series of prayer and just getting through one thing after the other. You know, I mean, preaching on Sunday morning when I became a pastor, you know, that was
Now, are
hard.
you going to do something online? Are you on, are you
I do a live
online for
worship.
sure? So you'll
I
be
do a
doing
live
something
worship
for Mother's Day online. Yeah.
Yes, I will. Yeah, I sure will. And, you know, I mean, I just pray myself through it. And honestly, in some ways, it'll be hard not being there because I love that people want to comfort me, you know, and I've had to learn to receive that comfort. And that was hard at first too. You know, I want to just cocoon myself. I mean, I think that's maybe our natural instinct is kind of to isolate ourselves. I think that's not necessarily always healthy either. And I think in times I've had to learn how to allow people to comfort me, like my, you know, nieces last year. You know, they just crawled in bed with me, and I needed that. And sometimes you don't even know you need it until those arms are wrapped around you. But I think it's that day is a matter of prayer. It just is.
Yeah. Well, I think too, maybe also being thankful that that if our mothers are still here and we're struggling with it's Mother's Day, but I'm missing my child and I'm having a hard time, you know, honoring and acknowledging the fact that being thankful that your mom doesn't have to go through what you're going through because you're still here for her.
That's right. Yeah, that's a
So,
really perspective.
yeah. Okay. So we have Susan says Mother's Day is bittersweet for me this year as that date is also my deceased daughter's birthday. Her friends took me to dinner last year to honor her memory, but not this year due to virus. And that's, you know, we were talking about, is it better or worse? This isolation thing for a lot of moms, this is hard. I'm hearing about a lot of moms that they're using this time to go through their kids' things that they haven't done in years and years, and they're using this time, and now they're triggered, and it's rough.
It is hard. And I think that's the downside of that, and is that Satan uses that isolation to start weaving in fear and doubt and all kinds of really ugly things, that you're alone and that what you're doing is stupid and how you're doing it isn't okay. And that's why community is so important to us, not only as Christians, but in our grief care. And you and I know how that is, just as we have come together in our grief. That's a powerful tool that God uses to uplift each other and to encourage. And that's why I say, I guess there's kind of a double edge, because I will miss that comfort that my people recognize that I'm struggling that day, and they just rally around and comfort me. And I will miss that. I will miss that this year. And I think that's not an okay thing for us. It will be hard this year.
Yeah. And I just, Susan, I'm just so sorry that it's a double whammy that, your daughter's birthday is on Mother's Day, but then on the other hand, here's this perspective. It's the same day. You don't have to deal with 2 different days.
2 different days. I was thinking that too.
Same
Like, that's
day.
almost kind
So
of
you can, there's a perspective thing for you. Get it all over with in one day, same day this year.
Yeah.
So,
but I'm so sorry, Susan, because it's not okay. Yeah. No matter how you slice that, it's not okay.
No. And I know you guys know we're, if we smile and laugh about things, we all get it. It's not, we're not making light of anything. It's just, no, you guys know that. Ruby, now Ruby, she says, how have you dealt with anger in your loss? And Ruby, I'm going to have you hang on to that, because on Monday, we're going to be talking to Wayne Jacobson, and that is the entire topic of the talk, is anger and grief. So be sure, I don't have it on me right now what time on Monday, but if you have a schedule, email me, laura@gpshope.org. I'll send you a schedule if you don't have one, but that's going to be our whole topic. So I'm going to save that question for Monday. Priscilla said, I don't look forward to anything anymore. I just don't have the energy. And that's just the way life is at the beginning. The grief just overtakes you. That's just the way it is.
Yep. You have enough energy to take a shower some days, and that's it. And some days you don't even have the energy to do that. And that is so normal and so okay.
It's just, you're just in survival mode right now. That's it. And that's okay. Vicky says, when I talk about Dominique, her son, to my other children, I get the feeling sometimes that they don't want to talk about him. And Vicky, I know you and I have talked about this a little bit, and that's another topic that we're going to have. We're going to specifically be talking one whole talk about our other children with the sibling loss, and that is going to be with Gloria and Heidi Horsley. Gloria lost her son Scott, and it was Heidi's brother, and they make a great team in talking. That's part of, Heidi that's her whole thing is sibling loss, helping parents understand sibling loss. So Vicki, I'm gonna really encourage you to watch that one when we talk to Gloria and Heidi. And then I think that's it.
Good.
So Angelique says thank you for tackling the guilt on the Mother's Day thing. And Ruby says looking forward to it. So yeah, dealing with the anger and the loss. So we've hit our hour.
All right.
That went by fast.
It did. It went really fast.
It always does. Lynn and I could just, we could just go for, in fact, sometimes we have.
Yes, we have.
And I happen to know Lynn has good wine.
Oh, you really do.
Oh, so Lynn's had her home open to us a few times, and we have done quite a few things together for
We've
grieving
traveled
moms.
together
So
and spoke at
we
different
yes, we
places.
have. We've flown out to California together, and
Mhm.
just one of those God connections. So Lynn, would you please pray us out?
I sure will. I sure will. Heavenly
Mhm.
Father, we bow before you and we thank you. We thank you for those that are watching live, for those that will watch later on. Lord, we just ask a blessing on their lives, on their families, on their children. Lord, as we
Mhm.
move into this time of Mother's Day, I pray that you put a hedge of protection around each one of us. Lord, we know that our children are amazing, and we thank you that they're in your care right now. Lord, I just pray that you guard our hearts here. And I pray that we remember that we grieve, but we grieve with hope in knowing that we get to be with them someday. So, Lord, we know that this grief journey is hard and we don't do it on our own strength. We do it with your strength in us. And I thank you for that. There are so many days I couldn't have gotten through without you. And I think all our viewers would agree with that. So Lord, we thank you for this opportunity, and I ask a blessing on each speaker as they come through the month of May. I thank you for each topic. Lord, I just give you all of this. I pray that this be done for our good and your glory. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. So right at the end of your prayer, I decided to pull up the schedule so I could let you guys know.
Yeah.
Monday, May 4th is at 1 o'clock. Now, this is Central Time. So 1 o'clock, we're going to be talking about anger and grief. And then on Tuesday, 7:30 in the evening, Central Time, is helping our other children with sibling loss with Gloria and Heidi Horsley. So those are the next two. The questions you had were the next two coming up. So Monday at 1 and Tuesday at 7:30 in that Central Time. So I decided I should pull that up and let you guys know. So
Sure, you know. Yep.
all right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us, and thank you for those who watch later, and Lynn especially, thank you. You
Oh,
know,
thank you.
love ya.
Love you guys. Bye.
All right, bye everybody, and we'll see you Monday.
Thank you.